Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is the third video dealing with this upcoming conclave and maybe even future conclaves of the Catholic Church, and whether, in this case, the cardinals are valid. Of course, if you hold to what appears to be that, well, Pope Francis was the real Pope, there is no problem, he had the right to appoint all these cardinals, he was super Orthodox, like you couldn't get a more Orthodox, a more Catholic Pope in your dreams. So of course he was solidly Catholic, and if you ask, is the Pope Catholic? As Newsweek apparently did a few years back, is the Pope Catholic? It asked. Then of course, he's 100% Pope, everything is fine. So no question, there's no point of this video. It's a waste of your time. But on the other hand, if you hold, like many, even cardinals have stated that, that Francis uttered plenty, using the words of Cardinal Gerhard Müller, the former head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith under Pope Benedict XVI. He said that Benedict uttered plenty of heresies. He calls them material instead of formal, but what's the difference? The difference is formal between material and formal is that material is like you don't know any better. You believe in a certain heresy, but you have no idea. You don't know any better. You're excused. A formal heretic would know this is against the teaching of the church, yet you hold it or teach it. And of course, in the case of Jorge, meaning Francis, he knew. He was a professor he was the head of the Catholic University in Argentina, the head of the Conference of Catholic Bishops in Argentina. He was a cardinal, and then he was apparently a pope. So obviously, if he utters things which are heretical, he knows, intellectually at least, that they are against the teaching of the church. And in that case, according to Cardinal Gerhard Müller, Cardinal Raymond Burke, the head of the Apostolic Signatura, which is the canon law, the highest court of the land, the Supreme Court of the Catholic Church for years, Cardinal Brandmüller, and basically every canonist, actually canon law professor Girlanda, something like that, which Francis actually made a cardinal. He himself, I had a previous video where he talks about how a pope no longer becomes pope, falls from the office by the mere fact, ipso facto, ipso jure, by the law itself. Nobody's touching him from the office of Peter if he adheres to, not personal, nobody knows he's a heretic, but pertinacious, manifest heresy. He refuses to give it up, and it's manifest. Then automatically, with no declaration necessary, according to the Codes of Canon Law, both the old and the new, he loses his office. So he deposes himself. So he is no longer, in reality, Pope. But materially, he's there. And that thing does not take effect, cannot be enforced until it is declared that he has fallen, that the seat is vacant. And Cardinal Girlanda, who was made a cardinal by Francis, explicitly states that it only takes a few cardinals who happen to be in Rome to simply declare the seat is vacant because the Pope has uttered and believes in heresy, and it is manifest, and he refuses to recant. Done. The seat is empty now. It's official. Now from that point onwards, his, as I discussed in the previous video, like you can watch that, his acts would become invalid. But previous to this declaration of the fact that he is no longer Pope, according to the Code of Canon Law, his acts of governance, of electing choosing cardinals, of giving faculties to bishops, of appointing bishops into different sees, all of that is illicit, meaning illegal, because he, in reality, objectively doesn't have the ordinary jurisdiction, doesn't have that right to do it. But it is even though it is illicit, illegal, yet because there was no declaration, so nobody really knows, there's no declaration of the fact that he has fallen, then these acts are valid. And I discussed as well in the previous video about the impeded see. That's the other position, is like, well, suppose, and no cardinal openly declared Francis to have said formal heresies and therefore not a pope. Cardinal Gerhard Müller came pretty close, but he never went to that point. But anyways, and one cardinal isn't kind of good enough. You have to have at least a handful or something. So therefore, according to, again, to the teaching of the church, again, we're going to deal with it here with antipopes in this video, antipopes. So popes who are, like, there's a real pope and here's an antipope, and this other pope, in the Great Western Schism, where three popes were there. Nobody knew which is the real one. All three appointed their own cardinals, gave faculties to bishops, and so forth. And as you will see that in the Council of Constance, many cardinals of all three obediences, of all three popes, the one we think might have been the real one, and the other two anti-popes, all of them, all the cardinals, 10 of them could not participate. You'll see that at the end of the video. There were 33 cardinals, only 23 participated, and some secular rulers from Germany, England, and France, and Italy, and Spain, I think, participated in the election of because all three, one abdicated, the other one was deposed, one was resigned, whatever. So all three were removed, even the real pope, and one was chosen, and that was accepted by all. So even the cardinals chosen by the anti-popes participated in the conclave. So shows you that, and then the point of this. So this is another point, and so this was, and the third position is that while Benedict was always pope, he died 2 years ago, 2022 or 2023. Leaving Francis. You can watch tons of other videos I did on the subject, even the last previous video to that. So he had, he said, I'm too tired, I'm too old, I can't really run the church anymore, so I'm giving up in his last audience specifically states what he renounced. He renounced the active exercise of the office, of the ministry. And he said in that last audience, explaining what his declaration he did. He said, what I did, it was grave, it was serious, it was so serious, but I stayed in the enclave of Peter, in the I can't remember the exact words of he used, and he said this act of his renunciation. In the Declaratio, he mentions, I'll be renouncing the ministry, but he clarifies he's renouncing the active exercise of the ministry. And he says that what he did not revoke what he received in 2005, which was what, boys and girls? The office of Peter, from the cardinals chosen for the papacy. So people say, oh, okay, well, he's the Pope, then Francis has no right to appoint any cardinals. And I mentioned previously, every single batch of cardinals, except the last two, from 2023 and 2024, were brought to Benedict to approve, bless, they kiss his hand, kiss his ring. So, in my opinion, that automatically validates them. And the last two, well, for all eyes to see, Francis is the Bishop of Rome. There is no other pope around. He's the one and only running the Diocese of Rome. And since cardinals are Roman clergy, the bishop of this diocese can appoint clergy to his various churches. And cardinals are Roman clergy. So therefore, it would make them valid. So all of this is actually encompassed in, again, as well in this based upon Code of Canon Law, supplied jurisdiction according to Canon 209 of the 1917 Code of Canon Law, which kind of codified the previous decretals of and I'm going to show you here, this is the 1917, I don't know if you can see it, which, upside down, inside out. Here you go. 1917, Pio Benedictine Code of Canon Law, big and nice. We're going to read Code 209, and it is basically kind of repeated in the slimmed down Novus Ordo version of the Code of Canon Law of 1983 of John Paul II. So, and it deals with supplied jurisdiction. And what is supplied jurisdiction, you say? Well, this is in case there's basically the church supplies for defects. Like the church will supply, in this case, we're going to talk about how does that work, the supplied jurisdiction. It makes valid what would otherwise be invalid. For example, confessing to a priest who, for all intents and purposes, everybody thinks he's the parish priest. But maybe he had an excommunication. Maybe he's been deposed, but nobody knew in the parish. So they went to him for their marriages or confessions. So objectively, these would be invalid. But the church supplies jurisdiction to this priest for the sake of the faithful and their salvation. And even in the case of governance. So I'm going to read the canon here, Canon 209. From the old code and Canon 144 in the new code. And then we're going to go really, I went through a bunch of websites and then I said, find the easiest thing. I found a couple of Perplexity and Grok, and I asked them about Conclave of Constance, which was a conclave too. Actually, it's elected the Council of Constance, which elected the Pope Martin V, who was apparently a layman. And when he got elected, he had to be ordained, because it goes here in this website here, Sede Vacante 1417, and it actually goes through the whole history of the Council of Constance and what prince called who and who appointed who, and it has the Latin and some English translations, and what cardinals participated, what princes participated, blah 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 blah. It's quite a big thing, but I'm not going to waste your time on it. If you want to, you can look it up yourself. So anyway, we're going to get to this point in a second, but let me just read Code Canon 209 of the old Code of Canon Law, the 1917 Code of Canon Law. So Canon 209. So it gives you the conditions of supplied jurisdiction. So when I was reading, actually, in this, I was looking notes at this dissertation by Father Misakwisku. I can't even pronounce his name. Anyways, I was reading a bit of it. It is Christ himself who is the one who has the power of governance in the church. He is the one who gives jurisdiction to the church. And then this jurisdiction is dispensed through the hands of the Pope in normal times. And maybe I'll cut to the chase. I'll tell you this before I read the canon. So in most cases, jurisdiction is supplied by, not even explicitly, we say supplied by the church. It will go to, in cases of the three cases, common error, doubt, and these are the two cases. And in the ancient pre-code laws, there was something called colored title. Colored title meaning, well, this guy, he's the bishop of whatever, Bishop of New York. Everybody thinks he's the Bishop of New York. He believes he's the Bishop of New York. He's been appointing priests to different parishes. He's been giving confirmations. Nobody really told us he's not the Bishop of New York. So for all intents and purposes, he is the Bishop of New York. He looks like the bishop. He dresses like the bishop. Of course, he's consecrated as a bishop. But he might, in reality, maybe he fell into heresy. We don't know. Maybe he lost his office. We don't know. He would lose. He become excommunicated. So he would lose. Maybe he got his office through simony. So this office is illegal. He got it invalidly to be as the Bishop of New York. So his acts are illicit, illegal. So he has no jurisdiction to appoint priests, to do confirmations, nothing. But we don't know that. Maybe the Pope suspended him, but maybe it was not declared and nobody knew. So all his acts, as long as they were not officially declared as he has been removed, so for all intents and purposes, he looks at the bishop. So this is common error. Everybody thinks he's the bishop. So he's got the colored title, which this condition was removed in the 1917 code, and as well not even mentioned in the 1983 code. So even that third condition of he has to have some kind of a title, so we can give it the excuse of supplied jurisdiction for validation of these acts. No. So basically, all his acts are illegal, illicit, but valid. So this goes to as well for somebody everybody thinks he's the Pope. He looks like the Pope. Nobody declared the seat empty. No group of cardinals declared the seat vacant because the Pope fell into heresy. Nobody. So for all intents and purposes, he is, even though he might not be in fact, but for all intents and purposes, he appears to be the valid Pope. He is the one, as Francis called himself, I'm the bishop dressed in white. When he went to Fatima, he said, I'm the bishop dressed in white. But if you understand Fatima, these children in the vision saw a bishop dressed in white. And we saw him like in a mirror. And in a mirror, you see a reverse image. Would be a pope and an antipope. And they said, it seems to us to be the Holy Father. That's their vision. And when Francis went to Fatima, said, I'm the bishop dressed in white. Okay, well, you're calling yourself the guy who seems to be the Pope, who appears like in a mirror. Okay, that's very smart of you, Jorge. Anyways, so that's the point of supplied jurisdiction. So let me read the canon here. So canon 209 of the 1917 code. In common error or in positive or probable doubt, okay, about either law or fact, the Church supplies jurisdiction for both the external and internal forum. So this whole dissertation of 335 pages or something is just on this canon. Just on this canon, supplied jurisdiction. And this same canon is basically repeat canon 144 of the, here, I don't know if you can see, but anyways, 144 of the new code. And it says, in common error, again, repeats the same condition, whether of fact or of law, and in positive or probable doubt, whether of law or in fact, the Church supplies executive governing, executive power of governance. So even though we might be mistaken, he looks like the Pope, but he's not. The Church supplies power of jurisdiction. He has governing power. He can appoint cardinals. He can appoint bishops to various sees. And I'll say before I forget, because it will be mentioned in one of these links, it says yes, if it's an anti-pope or it's a false pope or even or if we're talking about a bishop or something, yes, he has supplied jurisdiction. He has illicit power, but that exercise of that power is illicit but valid until such time that it is declared that he doesn't have that power, that he is a heretic, that he's been deposed, that whatever. Then that jurisdiction disappears. There is no more common error. There is no more colored title. There is no more doubt. So that, but other than that, before that happens, he does have that jurisdiction. But it says, like these, I think 3 canonists say basically the exact same thing. Yes, all his acts are valid, but where necessary. Where necessary. So not all his acts. For example, they say he might excommunicate another bishop or excommunicate a person. That excommunication would be null. So the Church does not supply or Christ himself does not supply that power to him. Christ supplies power for the good, for the salvation of the people, for their good governance. But so an antipope or whatever, an apostate bishop who would excommunicate, who basically kind of lost his office. His excommunications are null and void. There is no church supplies in this case, or Christ supplies. And we're going to see it as well in the other codes, because when they're discussing the Council of Constance and their three popes, okay, now we say, oh, this was the valid one. But for people at that time, they don't know who's really the valid one. There is no clarity. So there's common error. They all look pope to me. I don't know. This guy's excommunicating that guy's excommunicating this guy is appointing cardinal, this guy is appointing different cardinals, they have three different courts. You know what's going on here. So the two or three canons I'm going to show you here momentarily, they say when there's doubt about somebody, a doubtful pope is no pope. Even though he might be a real pope, he might be the valid one, but in, I guess, canon law, a doubtful pope is no pope. So really we had three doubtful popes in the Great Western Schism. So we really had, you can go to that extreme and say, well, there were no popes. There's two solutions. He says, well, if we assume the fact, let's assume two different things. If, let's say, oh yeah, there was one of them validly, one was the Roman line, he is the valid popes, and the other two were not valid. So the church supplies, not explicitly in writing or documents, but the church supplies, Christ supplies the church the power for governance, and the church supplies this power of jurisdiction, even, let's say, with the three popes, two antipopes and the real pope, through the real pope to the two antipopes, for the good of the faithful, for the governance of the faithful. So this supplied jurisdiction would go actually through the real pope, if there is one. And then he says, well, for the other argument, he says, well, even up to today, and we're not really 100% sure that there was a real pope, but he says, well, again, in doubtful cases, if there's a doubtful pope, is no pope. So let's assume, for argument's sake, he says, all three were invalid. So we have three non-popes. None of them is valid. Therefore, there is no pope to supply jurisdiction to the other contenders to the papacy, who themselves would be appointing cardinals to make all their acts of governance valid. Illicit, but valid. He says in that case, it is Christ or God himself who supplies jurisdiction to even all three of these popes. So jurisdiction will be supplied in any and all cases, because I've been hearing online and on YouTube and all these, some experts and some traditionalists saying, well, you know, we only need the pre-2013 cardinals to elect the pope, otherwise the conclave will be invalid. Well, it might, because Benedict was the real pope and Francis is not a pope. Well, Francis brought all the popes to Benedict up to 2022, all the cardinals. So this is important, because I'm pretty sure after the conclave, a lot of these groups are going to say, well, sorry, we did not have only the pre-2013 cardinals electing, so we don't have a pope, and we will never, ever have a pope. So they are like the 1958 sede vacantes, who basically say there is no pope and there cannot be a pope, because all of them are heretics, therefore all of them are non-Catholics, therefore they cannot choose a pope, therefore there is no pope till Christ's kingdom come. That's basically their non-Catholic position. So let me read the Canon 144 again from the New Code of Canon Law, which deals with the same subject. In common error, same thing, whether in fact or of law, and in positive or probable doubt, whether of law or of fact, the church supplies executive power of governance for both the external and the internal form. External and internal form. So, even absolutions, marriages, whatever, consecrations, appointing priests, bishops, the church supplies. Okay, so I don't want to waste too much time. I took a few little notes because I'm not going to read. So on page, I'm not going to go in order. Page 60, can I jump to the pages here? Can I jump to the pages or not? I guess no. So actually, if you wanted to see who it is, the author, historical synopsis and commentary and dissertation. Yeah, and you can find it online. I just found it online and I downloaded it. You can buy it on Amazon.com, I guess. There's the original Catholic University of America hardbound, $60. Then there's a paperback. Somebody just kind of probably did that one and published it, $17. Or you can just find it online and read it yourself. So a dissertation submitted to the Faculty of Canon Law of the Catholic University of America in partial fulfillment of the requirements for a degree of Doctor of Canon Law by Francis Sigismund Mayauskas, whatever, you can read that. Priest of the Archdiocese of Boston, and that was Catholic University of America Press. That was printed in 1940. So it's not some traditionalist novelty. They're kind of trying to find rules and laws. No, he discusses the creedal times, Gratian's decretals, and I just started reading it. It's like, it'd be interesting to actually read the whole thing, but I'm just trying to get you the quick points. These are the 3 points. Common error, doubt. These are the two basically only ones required by canon law. Common error, people think, oh, well, that guy looks like the Pope. He's, I think he's the Pope. He's been appointing. So obviously, so he has he has supplied jurisdiction. So all his cardinals, Francis's cardinals, are valid. Okay? So, and he says that before the codification of canon law, as it was done in the codification of the Code of Canon Law, the 1917 Code of Canon Law, a lot of canonists and some added the colored title, meaning, okay, he has to have some kind of a title. Okay, so he's the parish priest, or he's the bishop, or he's the patriarch, or he's the Pope. It might not be true, but he looks like it. So they added that. Anyways, but it's been removed by the other two, by the law of the church right now. So let me just kind of see if I can go a bit faster here. Let me move my face from that section. See if I can move a bit faster. Yeah, page 60. If we just get it to page 60, because I just have a few points I want to show you from this. 79. What page are we on here? 54. Okay, let's go down. 57, 58, 60. Okay. Okay, so here's it. As Sanchez later remarked, this difficulty lost all its legal cogency, which is talking about the colored title thing, after the Council of Constance, in virtue of the Constitution ad evitanda of Martin V. The faithful were no longer bound to avoid excommunicated persons. So the faithful were no longer bound to avoid excommunicated persons unless and until their excommunication had been publicly promulgated or expressly declared by an ecclesiastical judge, or unless their excommunication as a notoriously known fact resulted from their notorious sacrilegious attack upon a cleric. So because last video I was talking about how a pope automatically falls from office. He falls by the law itself. in both the old code and the new code for heresy, a heretic would automatically fall from office. So he no longer holds that office because he becomes excommunicate and he's no longer Catholic. He's no longer Christian. Therefore, he cannot be the head of the church whose member he is not. But that does not take... So this is written in... so he's talking about the Council of... Since the Council of Conscience. So this declaration, it's not mentioned in the 1917 code, but in the 1983 code, it is mentioned. It says, well, yes, no, he falls by the law itself. By the law itself, he loses his office. But to enforce that reality, that fact, it has to be declared by the competent authority. And the competent authority, according to various canonists, including Girlanda, which I mentioned, he was made a cardinal by Francis, is the cardinals, at least those present in Rome. They simply declare the Pope has defected, he lost the faith, he has fallen from office, the seat is vacant, sede vacante. They're not deposing him, they're just stating the mere fact that he has deposed himself. He has been deposed by the fact or by the law. Okay, so this declaration, this is very kind of a cool thing, because some people think, well, that's kind of complicates the thing. And no, it's from the Council of Conscience. Don't avoid an excommunicated person until there is a declaration. So even if a pope becomes an excommunicate because he falls from the papacy, we don't know until a declaration is made so. And in page 110, they talk about the colored title, which some, even modern, because he does mention it here, commentators say, well, yeah, we know it's no longer in the code, but, it really should be part of the code. So, conditions requisites for solving jurisdiction. Canon, what page is this here? 115. 115, do I have it highlighted? Okay, we'll come to 115 in 1 second. Page 110, 110. Yeah, 115. Okay. Okay, here. The code is significantly silent concerning the necessity of a colored title. A few commentators, even after the appearance of the code, still insist upon the necessity of the presence of a colored title. However, this teaching has not a large following. On the contrary, it has been and is felt by almost all authors that the silence of the code in regard to the necessity of a colored title is very significant and must be construed as prima facie evidence of the suppression of the need of such a colored title in every case in which the Church would supply the necessary jurisdiction. And he talks about the pre-code understanding, and we're not going to go through that. At page 115, what do I have here? What do I have in page 111? Oh yeah, so we talked about the not colored, need not be colored. Okay, here I'm going to page 112. In conclusion, therefore, it may be conceded that common error in regard to the existence of the validity of an office or jurisdiction is wont to arise among people because the priest or bishop in question, or pope in this case, in question, where is it? Had a colored title. Still, this does not furnish sufficient grounds to draw the conclusion and to support as irrefragable the general principle that a colored title is always required, and that common error, apart from it, does not suffice. Common error and by itself is sufficient. Common error and by itself is sufficient, according to both codes of canon law. So common error, well, this guy looks like the Pope, he's acting like the Pope, he lives in the Vatican, and so all his cardinals must be real cardinals, because for all intents and purposes, he looks like the Pope. We don't know if he was a heretic, Benedict was really the Pope, and So that's why the church supplies jurisdiction to his cardinals. So I'm not going to go through, so that's, yeah. Okay, what did we say? Page 115. Conditions requisite for the supplying of jurisdiction. Common error. Canon 209 basically reproduces an old law. So I'm not going to go through it. Introduction about common error, error and ignorance. So it's like, imagine, on one canon of the code, he has all that to say. So anyways, we're not going to go. Basically, you got my point, because I kind of, point of what I was saying. Hope you did. All right, just one last point from this book here on page 8. Where are we? Where's page 8? 4, 6, 8. Okay. In view of this analysis, it would appear jurisdiction may be canonically defined as a public power granted either directly by Christ himself or indirectly through the church by lawful commission of governing and leading the faithful towards the goal of eternal life. So it is the supplied power is either directly by Christ himself or through the church. So anyways, if you want, go find that book and just read it online or download it or go buy it. If you want the hardcover, buy it from Amazon. All right, so let's kind of quickly go and finish up. But I think I basically said pretty much what needs to be said. So these are different sites which give. So now we have this Miasquitz, whatever this guy, this priest who wrote this book in 1940, Dissertation Code Canon 209. This is from they're quoting another canonist, Wilmers, William Gilmos Wilmers, De Christi Ecclesia, Regensburg, which is in Germany, published in New York and Cincinnati in 1897. So this other priest we were talking about wrote in 1940. And he basically repeats a lot of stuff written in 1897. So this is just an introduction. Wilmers saying very clearly that Christ will grant jurisdiction to validate the acts of non-popes for the common good. And okay, now here's the relevant test in context. He's answering an objection against the doctrine that bishops receive their jurisdiction from the Roman pontiff, not from Christ directly. So, objection 5. So this is the objection. But within the objection, there is truth. Okay, if the Supreme Pontiff conferred jurisdiction on bishops, considerable difficulties would follow. Actually, before I continue, the other canonist, which we're going to finish up with, he does say, whether you believe that at the consecration of a bishop, he automatically receives jurisdiction, or he has to wait for it to be conferred by a pope. And the first canonist we're looking at the book, he was talking about only it was like in the 1200s that they said, well, I don't know who decided to separate jurisdiction from consecration. But so basically for 1,000 years before, that was not the case. So this other canonist, either him or another one, next one, he does say, well, whether you believe jurisdiction, when you consecrate a bishop, he automatically receives jurisdiction. He is a bishop. He's a bishop of what? Bishop of nothing? He's not some nothing. He's just a high priest of nothing. No, he has jurisdiction. So he either does, even if you believe whether he receives it through consecration or through the Pope, he still cannot exercise that jurisdiction, even if he receives it directly from Christ through consecration, without the dispensation or the authorization of the Pope, or at least implicit authorization, because bishops were consecrated all over the world before the popes decided, I want to see what other 1,000 bishops, who, like before the internet and phone calls and telexes and faxes. The world is big. Bishops were chosen by their own clergy, as still the Roman bishop is chosen by his own clergy and consecrated. And if he was not a bishop, or if he was not a bishop, the other 3 other bishops would come and consecrate him as the bishop of that city. Boom, done. They do not have to wait for the Pope to authorize. It is an implicit authorization. So the objection is, if the Supreme Pontiff conferred jurisdiction on bishops, considerable difficulties would follow. It would follow, in the first place, that in the time of the Western Schism, as long as the Pope was doubtful and therefore null, that would account for all 3 basically, the bishops who had been confirmed by the doubtful Pope would have lacked jurisdiction, and those priests would have equally have lacked jurisdiction who had been granted jurisdiction by bishops lacking jurisdiction. Nevertheless, the bishops in the Council of Constance supposed that they enjoyed jurisdiction for the purpose of settling the schism. That's exactly what happened to the cardinals of the antipopes. They were participated in the council. They just said, well, let's deal with it now. They all can vote and choose a pope. And when a new one was chosen, and apparently after the Martin was chosen, he did not start sacking the anti-pope cardinals. So his response is, this difficulty, if it is one, weighs on everybody, since all must admit that a bishop, in order to be a legitimate pastor, must be assumed and acknowledged by the supreme pastor, the Roman Pontiff. It weighs on each and every one of those who admit that. Again, even if this is like we're talking during the Council of Constance, how would the Bishop of Rome know about the bishop in Ireland? As I said, the bishops were chosen by their clergy and consecrated as bishops. They all assume the acceptance of Rome. Unless the bishop starts becoming a heretic, then the Pope would intervene and depose him. But let's continue. It weighs on each one of us who admits that jurisdiction, even if it is immediately conferred by the consecration, like as I was saying, or by Christ, cannot nevertheless be validly exercised unless the pontiff assigns a particular flock. So when in the past, the clergy of Lyon would choose their own bishop and his obviously this is the flock assigned to that bishop. He's not been consecrated chosen by the clergy of Lyon to be the bishop of Lyon, and he goes to Liverpool. No. So it is assumed, like the Pope didn't know every single bishop on the whole planet to give him permission, like now it is over centralization, I have to say. Over what's the word? Micromanaging the church. Enough already, please. And this way you will get actually a reunion with the Eastern Orthodox and the Oriental Orthodox, if you happen to be Orthodox. because they don't want the Bishop of Rome telling them who can they consecrate, not consecrate, how they should celebrate their liturgy, how they need to reform their liturgies to conform to the modern world. No, they don't want that. How they have to ignore all the ancient canons and adhere to novelties. They don't want that. If you truly want unification, then you don't want to do that. You don't want to micromanage and become a dictator, Pope. not a supreme pastor and guardian and defender, but a domineering monster. So, even if it is admitted that that jurisdiction is confirmed by consecration or by Christ, it cannot nevertheless be validly exercised unless the pontiff assigns a particular flock. That is, provides the matter. B. In this matter, the same principles apply as those which apply to supplying jurisdiction when it is a question of colored title, which we said is no longer even required, because this was written in 1897 before the 1917 Code of Canon Law. But we explained what colored title is. Like, the guy looks like the Bishop of Paris, so obvious, and he's nobody's saying he's not, so he might not be, but and an invincible or common error of the faithful. A priest who is proclaimed as parish priest by simony lacks jurisdiction according to the canons, but because he is thought to be the parish priest, the simony being unknown, and he has some title, although invalid, therefore he has jurisdiction. He has jurisdiction, even though really, in fact, it is an invalid title, an invalid authority. But he still has jurisdiction because the church supplies for the defect. The same is to be said of a bishop bishop chosen simoniacally, meaning he bribed people to get himself elected, and consequently, according to the canons, lacking jurisdiction. The church has equally supplies the defects, and thus a bishop, for the sake of the common good, obtains jurisdiction. This is to be applied to the three doubtful pontiffs. So he himself calls supposedly now one valid Roman line. He himself in 1897 or whatever, he says three doubtful pontiffs. Supposing all of them to be doubtful. I mean, he's giving the possibility. All are, we don't know. For the people at that time, all were doubtful. They don't know. Would you know if you were living there? It's like, oh, there's a pope in Rome, pope in Avignon, pope in Pisa. I don't know where else. I don't know. They all have cardinals. They all say they're a pope. They're all dressed as the pope. They're all giving the apostolic blessing. They're all signing their name, Pope so-and-so, Pope and Pontiff PP. Of course, unlike Francis, who just signs Franciscus. But with this difference, that it is so in case that we have three doubtful popes, so basically we have no popes in solid objective manner. If it's doubtful, it's null. In this case, it is not the church but God himself who supplies for the defect and grants jurisdiction. So anybody talking about Francis was a heretic, he's been fallen, Francis Benedict was really never abandoned the office, as Gans once said in 2016. And as Benedict himself said in his last audience, he said, what I did not revoke what I received in 2005, which is the papacy. Francis was a heretic. There were manipulations at the council to elect him by the St. Gallen Mafia. There was an extra vote for his election, which would nullify the conclave. There was a billion things. But in this case, he seems to be the Pope. That's the common error in that case. So three doubtful, supposing all of them were doubtful, but with this difference is that it is not the church but God himself who supplies for the defect and grants jurisdiction. Indeed, each of the obediences thought. So each group of cardinals and with their Pope, the three different obediences, thought and said that its own pontiff was legitimate, and that the two others were schismatics, and each pontiff possessed some colored title, because he's the Pope elected by cardinals. He's surrounded by cardinals, and he's creating more cardinals. And he's assigning bishops to different churches and priests. And in such manner that for many people it was very difficult, and is so even now, to discern which of them was truly legitimate, even now in the 1900s, up to the 1900s. Hence, just as God himself confers jurisdiction to govern the church on the legitimately elected pontiff, in the same way, he also went on granting jurisdiction on a doubtful pontiff on account of the invincible error of those adhering to him to the extent necessary. To the extent necessary. He himself, therefore, could not confer jurisdiction on the bishops adhering to him. But it is like of his own authority. It was given to him by God, validating the jurisdiction. Okay, we said to the extent necessary, that is, for the government of the faithful who adhere to them. But it was not necessary for this purpose that if they pronounced an anathema on the opposing side and excluded from the church, this exclusion would take effect. It's not necessary. It would not basically take effect. Hence, it does not follow from the fact that their other acts were valid, even though they had really no jurisdiction, in fact, but they were given supplied jurisdiction by God himself. That the act by which they excommunicated the other side was also valid. So he says, just because these other acts of governance were valid, doesn't mean that the other acts of excommunications were valid. No, these were not necessary, so these were not valid. Okay, again, this is William Wilmer's De Christi Ecclesia from 1897. That's why he talks about the colored title, which this 1940 canon, Doctor of Canon Law dissertation mentions the Codes of Canon Law, that this colored title has been suppressed as a necessity for supplying jurisdiction. Oh yeah, in case you here, if you want to read something by Reverend Wilmers, you can find The Christian Religion, Handbook of the Christian Religion, from archive.org. Anyways, so all right, so this we had two. Now number 3, there's De Ecclesia Christi, 1946. So 6 years after the first one we talked about. Another Jesuit. I think they're all Jesuits, I think. The second Wilmers, S.J., right? Wilmers, yeah. That's when the Jesuits were still Catholic. Anyways, so Father Timothy Zappalena, 1946. So, he says, but upon granting our thesis, there follow serious problems for the time of the Western Schism. So this is kind of like their go-to case in history to talk about supply jurisdiction. Certainly, a doubtful pope is no pope. Certainly, a doubtful pope is no pope. However, during the whole time of the schism, the true pope was doubtful. Nobody knew who was the real one. Therefore, there was none. There were no popes. Hence, he could not, the pope, the valid pope, could not confer jurisdiction upon the bishops. It would follow, therefore, that bishops confirmed by a doubtful pope lacked true jurisdiction. The same may be said about priests who received their jurisdiction in the eternal form from these bishops. But nevertheless, the bishops gathered at the Council of Constance, supposed that they had the power to convoke a council and repair the schism. Therefore, it will be permissible in the first place to turn back the argument upon the adversaries. The aforesaid difficulty presses them all in the same way as it does us. For all admit the bishops to the exercise of jurisdiction. So they admit the exercise need either for all admit the exercise of actual jurisdiction. For all admit the bishops to exercise actual jurisdiction need either pontifical election or recognition. If a doubtful pope cannot confer jurisdiction, neither can he truly confirm a bishop who is chosen to be or consecrated. B. Therefore, let the response be direct. According to those, just one second. Turn on some light, bring some light in here. Let the response be direct. According to those things which we said in Thesis 11a, whatever that is, the true Pope was, Therefore, let's response be according to those things which have been said, the true Pope was the Roman one. That is Urban VI and his successors. Therefore, he was able to give jurisdiction even to the bishops of other obediences, meaning the bishops of the antipopes, on account of the common error of the faithful together with the colored title. Especially at that time, because actually, a colored title is kind of actually adds a bit of gravity to it. Even the election of Martin V seems to be explained by the faculty given to the council by Gregory XII, which was, I think, is an antipope, who first actually said, well, go ahead and summon the council. And then the Roman pontiff was granted as well a right to convoke it. So they basically both convoked it. For the rest, if you figure those three popes, first of all, if he says, well, if we recognize that the Roman one was the right one, he actually gave jurisdiction to the bishops of the other obediences, of the other popes, their cardinals, their priests, their bishops, for the sake of the faithful and because of common error and a colored title. And then on the other hand, if you figure those three popes to be null, you ought to admit that jurisdiction is supplied on account of colored title, not indeed by the church, which lacks the supreme power, but by Christ himself, who would confer jurisdiction on each of these antipopes. So Christ himself would supply jurisdiction to each of these antipopes as much as was necessary. Again, that part, as much as that was necessary. So, for example, one of the popes decides to excommunicate the other pope, or their bishops, that would be null. It would not be valid. Okay, so practical commentary on the Code of Canon Law. Oh, that's the fourth one. So now we have Reverend Stanislaus Woywood, friar missionary, Franciscan, 1957. So that's the fourth authority. In the old canon law, the great majority of canons and moralists did not admit that common error alone was sufficient to make the exercise of jurisdiction valid. They demanded, in addition, a titulus coloratus, colored title. That is to say, some act on the part of the superior which is ordinarily sufficient to confer jurisdiction. So a pope, even an anti-pope or a doubtful pope, conferring, creating a cardinal and granting them a church in Rome, or choosing a bishop and giving him a diocese. But which, on account of some secret impediment, was rendered invalid. That color of title is no longer required. Because I mentioned it, in 1917 code is no longer required. Same thing as the 1983 Code of Canon Law. And in case of common error, no matter how created, the church supplies the jurisdiction for the benefit of the people. Okay, so we had now four authorities on the subject. And maybe I will just skip all of that because I had from Perplexity and from Grok talking about supplied jurisdiction and the Pope and how it applies to the popes and antipopes. And basically we covered basically a common error, all the, so I really don't think I need to, and that the council fathers, one of them actually mentions that 23 out of the, so here, the Council of Constance treated the cardinals of the antipopes with a pragmatic approach aimed at healing the schism and restoring unity. So all cardinals, 23 cardinals participated, and so here's the supply jurisdiction of antipopes. So the danger of death, that's common error, doubt, and of course that's according to the Code of Canon Law. And of course there's the colored title before the Code of Canon Law, before Code 209 in the old one and Code 144 in the new one. So it talks about the supply jurisdiction in the case of the Western Schism, and does mention Fathers Zappalena. So color title, historical precedents. Let's see here. Because in one of the sites, it actually does divide. It shows you how many of the antipopes were voting at the cardinal. They actually give you the background and the points. Research suggests that cardinals appointed by antipopes likely participated in electing Pope Martin V at the Council of Constance. The evidence leans towards inclusion of cardinals from all papal lines, including those created by antipopes to ensure unity. And one of the popes who refused to come to the council and he was deposed, his cardinals abandoned him and they participated in the Council of Constance to elect, to end the schism and choose the Pope. Here it is. The election of Pope Martin in November 1417 involved a conclave of 23 cardinals and 30 delegates from 5 nations: England, France, Italy, Germany, and Spain. And this whole thing was meant to end the schism. It seems likely that the cardinals appointed by antipopes such as Clement the 7th, John the 23rd, and Benedict the 13th, and I think it is Benedict who refused and got deposed, and his cardinals left him basically and went to the conclave. Some of them, 10 of them didn't. The rest actually went. Were part of the 23 cardinals, as historical records of the cardinals from these lines participating in the conclave. And I think, yeah, here it gives you. So it says that it gives you the name of the cardinals. And it actually gives you the site which I was talking about, Sede Vacante 1417. And about this case of Benedict the 13th, none of his cardinals who were still living still adhered to his cause. And they basically, because he refused to come to the council and blah, 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 so basically his cardinal said, bye-bye, and basically didn't adhere to his cause and went to the Council of Constance. And actually Benedict, former adherents would, so it was agreed that Benedict's former adherents, his anti-cardinals, if you want to say, would summon a council to meet at Constance, and at the same time, the fathers of Constance would summon Benedict's prelates to the Council of Constance. So this is actually kind of, if you want to go and delve into the detailed historical account of this big long article here, but let's go to Grok, and it basically gives you that cardinal, that's from appointed by Antipope in Avignon. That cardinal was the Roman line, the valid ones. This one is as well Pope from Cardinal from Avignon, Roman Antipope, Pope from the Pisan Antipope. That's a cardinal from there. John the 20th, again. This cardinal is from as well Antipope, Pisan Antipope, John the 23rd. Antipope, Pisan Antipope, Roman Antipope, Antipope. There's more antipope cardinals than the Roman ones, apparently. Roman, antipope. So these are the cardinals. So you can see antipope cardinals were part of the Conclave of Constance. So they are part of the conclave because they received supplied jurisdiction by Christ himself for the common good, and they have the colored title. They seem to be cardinals, he seems to be pope, and the common error of everybody, of the whole people. So this way, okay, this is the conclusion to this. There is no doubt that the cardinals in the upcoming conclave to elect a successor of Peter, not of Francis, are valid and have authority to do so. I discussed in this video, previous video, about more things, and about the third one was the number of cardinals exceeding 120, the limit set by Universi Dominici Gregis, which is the constitution for the conclaves. So I discussed all of them. So yeah, so I call upon all so-called traditionalists not to be stupid, and when a new pope comes up, you know, maybe a Cardinal Robert Sarah, they reject him because, he was elected by Francis Pope. Cardinals, they don't have authority. We only need the, 100-year-old cardinals from John Paul II and Benedict to give us the true pope. If you're going to go down that path, bye-bye. Because for you, the church has ended. The church has ended. There is no pope then. Go become Eastern Orthodox. Go make up, go join any bishop. Okay, whatever. Doesn't really matter. So, anyways, that's all I wanted to say. And if I have the chance, if I'm able, I'll do a review of maybe tomorrow or the day after, of the movie Conclave, which I found to be extremely realistic, not flattering, because it depicts faithless men, the conservatives, the traditionalists, the simoniacs, the ones, all kinds of things. Reality, basically. Not very flattering, but the liberals, the conservatives, the traditionalists. It's pretty good. Well, it's quite boring, but quite realistic, actually. Well, maybe I'll have a chance, I'll do a review, otherwise I won't. All right, I'm getting calls everywhere. Okay, that's it, that's all. See you next time. Bye-bye.